I like the relationship between concepts and image. And I think that as we begin to think about integrated research, service, and teaching, it's a process of weaving. And the reason I chose a Mobius strip for the fundamental image is you take a strip of paper, you twist it half a twist, you connect it. So what started out with two surfaces, two sides of a piece of paper, becomes one surface. And it's kind of an image of infinity. And that's important for other reasons we can talk about later. But this weaving together of what look like different things, and they are in fact different, but they're also coalescing moments. And I think that's what we're trying to think about together today as we talk. So what is a Mobius strip? There's a whole metaphysics behind this, and we're not going to talk metaphysics tonight, but all of you are engaged with whole person education. And that is a means of connecting what traditionally have been called the earth and the heavens. So as you're sitting here, think about your personhood. Again, how did you get to this point? What are your values? Think about how you want to advance your career. We're not clear about how to do that always. And so that's an ongoing navigation, articulation, and so forth. How do you handle family or personal responsibilities? How does money come into all this? We've talked about some of the funding challenges in colleges and universities. And then how do you articulate your communities of belonging at multiple levels, even within the college and the university, but also outside? So we have to keep in mind when we think about integration, this movement between the university at multiple scales, from departments to units to the college as a whole, and also how pathways lead in and out of the university. You're all faculty members or administrators. We're all students in an ongoing way, and we have community partners and global partners. So to think about integrating research, service, and teaching, in my perspective, we have to think with all of these constituents: faculty members, also TAs and tutors, administrators, students, and partners. And so we don't want to pretend that always these functions are totally separate. So all of you are very, very busy. You've all got more than enough work to do. You're teaching, you're doing curriculum development, you're mentoring, facilitating, developing projects, raising money, doing research, publishing, and all of that stuff. As Ike said, not in equal proportion, and that's absolutely appropriate. We do have different areas of interest and capacity, but I completely believe that we need to enhance our capacity across all of these areas as we move through our lives. So that mosaic is a Mobius strip from ancient Rome, and it's all about time. That would be an interesting thing to think about too. It's about time and seasonalities. Okay, I want to say a teeny tiny word about myself, because I've always been interested in this question of integration, even though I wasn't quite sure how to articulate it, and I'm still working on that. But I knew this concept of whole person was extremely important to me, and I felt like I had enormous amounts of work to do to move in that direction. So I started out getting a Master of Arts in Religion at Yale Divinity School. I had many motivations for going to Divinity School, and it's a 2-year degree, non-ordained, but I just wanted to focus on the question of, first, disciplinary integration and across-discipline work, which I've always tried to do. So I took theology and history of religions and biblical studies from a fantastic professor named Luke Johnson. So I want to honor my teachers here, just as We honor our teachers and students honor us. We honor the students. I took a seminar on Heidegger and Being in Time with Karsten Harries. I studied literary theory, which I didn't understand at all at that time, with a guy named Robert Casario. The Divinity School at Yale is up on a hill, appropriately on Prospect Street. And so I would walk back and forth on Prospect Street, I love that word, to go take these courses at different places downtown. So partly I was trying to get a handle on disciplinarity and across the board. And then I also was trying to figure out what to do with my life. You know, what do I want to do when I grow up? I still have that question, by the way, but I've made some of those decisions. I was trying to decide whether to become a professor or a counselor. And so all of my community placements were in community mental health centers and halfway houses with psychiatric hospitals. And I took a lot of counseling courses. So obviously what I decided to do was move in the professoriate way because I think I was finally more compelled by kind of philosophical, artistic, literary work than feeling like my primary role was in the mental health area. But I think teaching is very much, for me, a kind of broadly therapeutic activity. And I think all of our well-being is extremely important on the mental health side, et cetera. So as we think about integrating research, teaching, and service, we also have to think about balancing our work and our lives. And of course, there's no difference there. Okay, so then what I did, I decided to get a PhD in interdisciplinary studies. So that took care of a bunch of more academic questions. I was a professor for a long time doing teaching and writing and research. I like to write, so that's an advantage. And then I got into administration about 18 years ago. And I love that because that gives us leverage to create these new pathways for ourselves, for students, for partners, and for our institutions. And I've done a bunch of that in different ways. Why do we want to integrate? I think it makes life better. I think it makes life richer. All of us are very curious people. And so it gives us a chance to follow up on those curiosities and to meet enormously interesting people. So we're using at Hong Kong U, we're using this idea of flourishing and future readiness a lot for a lot of different projects, both for students and for faculty colleagues. So what does it mean to be ready for the future? I mean, we do not know, of course, what the future will bring. And so how do we develop what people are calling resilience? How do we develop adaptivity, flexibility, quick thinking on our feet, new relationships? I think we could think a lot about what new relationships we want to form. And I'm not going to go through all those terms around the edges, but those are just some attributes of preparing ourselves for what we cannot predict. And I'm quite okay with we can't predict it. That's what makes it the future. But we want to flourish individually with our communities, with our families, with our colleges. And part of that is to be able to be adaptive quite quickly. Okay, so the mission of all of your schools somewhere has the term whole person education in it, or liberal arts, or something like that. So we can use that mission as a point of leverage. Whenever you're working on integration, refer back to the mission so that you gain leverage with different sectors of the school. The school says it wants to do X, create whole person education, create service to the community. So use that as a way of driving change. Just say, yeah, here we are, we're doing that. This gives people a compass. It says, here's the direction we're moving in. Here's how we can move in that direction. And you can use that language with students, with administrators, with community partners, and with each other. So that's one thing. The other thing, it gives us a way to sort of steer very tangibly and practically in the direction of integration and trying things out. I think that's a great idea to bring together directors of all these different units They like each other when they get together, but they don't have time to get together. So somehow or another, I think that's a key component. Make time, even if it's lunchtime or tea time, to get people together and begin to talk through these things. And then every one of you in your different institution, in your different locality, has different cultural traditions. You have all sorts of global and local conditions you're dealing with, and a utopian impulse. All of us want to make a difference and make things better. So we've got a lot to work with in terms of the task of integration. So again, the main point here is just to go back and look at your mission and see how in your own situation you can use that to help leverage the task of bringing a bit more coordination to these three activities. How is institutional movement, wherever you are located, toward integration encouraged? And the second thing is, what would you recommend as first steps to begin to better weave together research, teaching, and service? Community of practices is a fantastic idea because that can be organized around any areas of interest, and they're going to be overlapping, and they get people together talking. So notice how all of these are bringing different groups together that sometimes don't get together. Move away from disciplinary silos. That's a massive problem in universities, right? There are reasons for that, and the silo, by the way, is a 19th century image right out of agricultural culture. That's not where we live. We live in network culture. Start with what a specific community needs most, yes. And as soon as you ask each other what communities are important, you're going to already make enormous progress. And then what is the greatest need of that community? The goal is to set up these simple and then more sophisticated conversations with a bunch of different constituents. Formal partnerships and especially good longitudinal partnerships are very important. I'm no longer interested very much in one-off activities. I want long, sustainable partnerships. That's what creates change. Leadership buy-in is important, but not always necessary. The goal of what I'm talking about is for you to take one or two ideas back to your institution and do something modest. That's already been accomplished just now in all of those good comments. So, I mean, you guys are so in touch with what your institutions need and what you would like, that kind of ground of your own desire is what motivates and generates all these possibilities of more formal integration. And so that's what you need to keep moving. And we all know this, but it's not easy in day-to-day life. The next few slides, I'm just going to briefly give you a sense of what the Common Core does, which is the program I direct. It's basically Hong Kong U's general education program, but I love it. And it's an incredibly dynamic program. So one thing is maybe some of your GE programs can be a center or a participant in some of these integrative activities because they should be doing that already. So the Common Core deals with 17,000 undergraduates. They all have to do this. It's a requirement. It's across 10 faculties, and students have to take 6 courses. The fact that it's across 10 faculties and that all the students are required to do it is enormously important for the task of integration. We're not yet talking quite about research and service for teachers, but close, because we have a lot of teachers and a lot of students who do research. And research, teaching, and service, we have to continually reimagine those. We cannot settle into old definitions. We have to reinvent all those terms, not constantly, but we've got to keep talking with each other about that. So what I want the students and my colleagues, and it's always both, by the way, and our partners, I'm always thinking about all of these, is to develop what I call creative transdisciplinary capacities. Now, who the heck knows what that means? But I like the word creativity. It's always transdisciplinary and transsectoral. And it's a building up of capacity which leads to flourishing and future readiness. In green along the edges, that's the rationale that I give students and colleagues and administrators and families about why we need something that integrates all of these areas. They don't really believe that very often. They think they want a finance major and they're going to get rich and be happy forever after. We know that's not like how life happens. So I try to undo those expectations and give them something much more vibrant in its place. And then at the bottom, those are the areas of knowledge we use, and those can be any number of different things. But we're doing a lot with big data these days, and so forth and so on. Okay, so that's the overview. What I see as what all of us are doing here this morning, and in the Common Core, and in integrating different areas, is to create dynamic learning platforms. That can mean any number of things, many different types of things, but it's got to be dynamic and it's got to be a platform, because platforms are what gives us the capacity to change and develop. If programs become stagnant, they die. If research becomes stagnant, it dies, teaching and so forth. And then what does it mean for you? And think about this in your own experience. What attracts you to different types of cultures? And is your institution, is your department, is your office, is it a culture of attraction? Most of them will be, but what can you do to enhance that culture of attraction? Because that will go back to your desire, and that will help us integrate research, teaching, and service, okay? So here are the SDGs. This is one way that you can immediately begin integrating across the areas we're interested in. We use the SDGs along with many other things, but it's a primary framing tool for us. So we created transdisciplinary minors, for instance, in sustaining cities, cultures, and the earth, because I'm not interested in sustainability becoming simply an earth science or geophysics or something like that. I love those things, but it's got to move across much larger scales. And so students sign up for these transdisciplinary minors if they want a way to move through the Common Core in a more coherent manner. We do a lot of undergraduate research. So when I start thinking about integrating research, teaching, and service, I'm thinking about the first moment a student walks on campus until the moment when a colleague gets a Nobel Prize. But most of us are in between, right? But I think if you start thinking about the modalities and multiplicities of research for students, that will, as Ike said, that begins to create a culture of mentoring. And that can all lead very quickly to research and publication and a whole bunch of good stuff. And again, think about that image of a Mobius strip and this weaving together. We do a lot with gamification. Students love games. I know nothing about e-gaming, but my students like it. So we take that into the classroom. We take that into our partnerships in Hong Kong. We take it into the many hackathons that we do around the SDGs. The SDGs give ways to do community service and community projects, and it gives people an articulatable focus about why we're doing this. And as all of you know, they're 17 and they're hugely broad, so everybody can find something they like here and they're interested in. I want people to be working on what they're interested in and to develop a set of knowledge practices where they will get interested in even more things, especially with our students. And then the SDGs are an immediate way to develop international exchanges. So what this does, it gives an individual or a department or a faculty or a school or a college or university a way to work on developing this whole host of relationships that will lead to better teaching, because it has to be grounded. It has to be almost always project-based. And I'm a big believer in project-based learning. We don't allow final exams in the Common Core. The students have to do projects around big questions. And that helps them too for their future readiness. It helps our colleagues get out of their teaching habits and have to learn new things about digital pedagogies, but also project-based pedagogies. And it gets them off campus into Hong Kong to do all sorts of exploratory things. We have many, many international exchanges. I'll mention a couple of those, but this allows you to go back to your mission and to hook what you're doing in your classroom, in your community-based projects, in your research, back to that mission statement. And people will like that. You're just fulfilling what you've been asked to do. Okay, so anyway, I'll just underline that. Look at the SDGs if it's appropriate for your situation. Don't try to overdo it. And it's a slow learning process. We're working with all 8 universities in Hong Kong, though, around the SDGs. And so that allows us to become partners with them at a much, much deeper level, too. We just created this global liberal arts design experiment so that we could have a consortium of programs like the Common Core around the world that we do different partnerships with. You've got to create these platforms where you can say to a community partner or a colleague or a student, here's how we can facilitate this coming together and integration of research, teaching, and service. And then we also have a whole host of Hong Kong learning partners, from Animoca Brands, which is a $1 billion company, a gaming company, to other multinationals, to very small NGOs, to art groups. What that gives you is an ability to choose who you want to work with for reasons that you want to work with them. That can lead to different types of teaching and different types of research, much less service. I started off by saying we have to think about our own personal experience, and we have to think about our community experience, and we have to think about our institutional experience. These things are already woven together, sometimes for the good, sometimes they're frustrating. But it allows us to think about what the resources are for integrating these more formal areas. So I just wanted to let you know about some of basically our campus partners. So we're deep partners, very consciously, by the way, and on purpose, with the Center for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning. We do all sorts of things with communication intensive courses and different types of pedagogy, many, many workshops with colleagues and students and tutors. We're very close with student affairs in terms of mental health issues, but also internships. I think project-based learning and internships are ways that we can build out research culture in some areas, not all areas, and we can come back and talk about that. Technology Enhanced Learning Initiative. There are digital partners and multiple projects, including using machine learning to look at the SDGs across the whole Hong Kong 8 university context. All 10 faculties. Now, this is important because the Common Core, all of our courses are created for the Common Core and taught by regular faculty members. So all 10 faculties contribute courses to what we do. That's a huge gift, which is very difficult in most situations. It couldn't have happened in my previous institution in the US. I mentioned Hong Kong Learning Partners. There's always those in development. And just a side word about that, student associations can also be our Hong Kong Learning Partners, and they love that. And they're really dedicated to try to change things, as all of our students are. So how do we take advantage of that when they become our partners and actually our leaders in how to redesign some relationships with different parts of the world? And then GLADE I've already mentioned. So what my idea is that you look at your scales and you work across as many scales as possible. Obviously, there's time constraints and energy constraints and money constraints. But I think if we work across scales, that brings together colleagues to have those ongoing conversations. And it's infrastructure, building pathways, and ongoing conversation that's going to allow more integration to occur at different levels of the college or university. So I'm just thinking about what are the principles of a great administrator. And For me, there's time constraints, but I think faculty members are often administrators. Administrators are often faculty members. We're all trying to do service. We're all trying to think and inquire in a formal manner, which is what research is. So I think there's already this interweaving going on here. So creating relationships, that for me is the most important thing. I've had thousands of gallons of coffee at the coffee shop on campus because I like to talk to people about what they're doing. I want to be able to say to them, teach what you want to teach, and how can we help you do that? Research what you want to research. How can we help you do that? And be of service in ways that you want to be. How can we be helpful there? All of us are always scanning the entire globe for good ideas. There's so many here tonight. Touch points and tangents. What is a touch point for you with another friend or colleague or student? What surprises you that comes out of nowhere that you can then leverage into a program? That's what I mean by tangent. Energizing with rhythm. Do any of you know any administrators that have no sense of rhythm at all? Well, I do. And I think rhythm's important for administration. So how do you keep that energy going at different levels from the department up to the college and the faculty? Coordinating and collaborating. Those are not automatic behaviors. And in fact, in graduate school, people are trained away from that in many ways, even though in the sciences, they do great work in labs. But we have to get better at collaborating and coordinating too. For me, we really are co-learners. And again, thanks to Ike for that term. So then you've got to do the hard work of policies. It's important to have good policies that are not static. So keep revisiting those. I'm very, very fortunate because I have a very, very flexible office, and I report to one person above me, who's the associate vice, the vice chancellor for teaching and learning. That's wonderful because I can move very quickly. That's not always the case, right? Colleges and universities are famously slow. That actually has some good things about it too. But you want to figure out when to move quickly and when to move slowly if you want to set the policy and infrastructural stage for integration. It cannot depend on one person because that one person will become exhausted and burned out. You got to build that phrase that you mentioned, the community of practice. And you got to actually enjoy it. We do a lot around lunch, and people love to eat. And when they're happy after about 30 minutes, the conversation gets much better. And then looping back, I think one of Ike's words was flow back. That's really important too. But you've got to keep looping back in order to keep moving forward. So my big point here is that administration has a tone, and there are many different ways that we can use that tone and rhythm of administrative structures and people and offices to create the conditions for better integration of research, teaching, and service. It will not happen automatically, in my experience. Okay, so back to your typing skills for just a second. If you would, jot down 3 administrative and academic units that might be in better conversation with each other on your campus. And if you have an extra second, how might that be facilitated? We've already talked about that, right? As I said, bring people together from different offices through the United Board or other consortia or on campus. So what are 3 administrative and academic units? I want you to think across this difference between the academic and the administrative, which is a false difference at some level and a true difference at other levels. But anyway, just jot down some ideas there. And then secondly, or just whatever, you can answer both or just one, but what would actually excite you the most? And I use that word quite specifically. What excites you the most about the possibility of integrating? Student affairs, Christian ministry, guidance, absolutely fantastic, and those are deeply related. Work-life balance. I don't think there's a homeostatic work-life balance. I think that's an ongoing navigation, but you've got to have structures so that you can step back, take a breath, move in different directions, constantly be adaptable to new changes. Yes. What else? Academic vice rector, IT, event. Yeah, you bring those people together on your campus, and you've got to structure a conversation. I don't know who that person would be, but bring those people together and have 3 questions, and there's going to be an enormous amount of activity there. Engineering, architecture, university. Yeah, fantastic. Think about what you could do with just those people in one room. Student affairs, mission office, and yeah. As soon as you begin to imagine the possibilities here, it's going to generate fantastic stuff. Research, social development, mission and ministry, and academic. Yeah, so that word transformative, right? That's what all of us are trying to do, and that's what all those offices are tasked with, but they don't think together enough about what that might mean in a tangible, everyday, long-term way. We just had a student in our undergraduate research, Common Core transdisciplinary undergraduate research program, be the first author in a computational linguistics journal. I barely know what that means, but that is research and collaboration and coordination and mentorship all in one. We all know that this world is moving towards all those things like AI, but also just uncertainty, geopolitics, the weather, whatever. And so we have to keep multi-generational learning going on about what we mean by future readiness. Admin retreat that inspired collaborations on the way to the venue. Yeah, right. That's fantastic. Choose a venue well, and on the way to the venue or at the bar afterwards or coming home, that's when these conversations happen. Creative ways to get together. Yes. Now, why do people like that? All of us are communicative beings, right? We do not live in a linear world. We don't live in a siloed world. We live in a network, nonlinear world. And that's what we have to educate ourselves towards. That's what allows integration too. So how do you become co-authors with your students? We did a teaching development grant on students as partners in developing digital assessments. And we published that. There are all sorts of journals out there. So students and professors publish together in something like a journal for student partnership. So there are different ways of doing that in different areas. And there's lots of journals out there. So this is the other thing that happens when we start talking about integration is you start sharing ideas with each other. In order to integrate research, teaching, and service, you've got to reimagine each of those terms. You've got to come together and have some basic agreement about those terms. You've got to have some infrastructure and administrative pathways through which you set the conditions for the success of those integrative activities. And you've got to have time for people to get together and enjoy each other. Everybody's smart, but you've got to just have those relaxing moments, sometimes formal, sometimes not, where they can begin to share ideas unexpectedly. I was involved with this extraordinary 6-year project called the More Than Human City with my partner in crime at Utrecht University. I met him when I was at an art and technology conference at midnight for people that just wanted to walk around the streets of Montreal. And it's a total accident, but it created that one touch point where we built on that in very unexpected ways. So anyway, we want to keep our eyes open. Okay, so I said this was created a better plan. You've all created a plan already. The goal of my talk is for you to go away with 1 or even 2 ideas that you can take back to your institutions and do something with. So you've already generated more than enough. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Are there any particular questions that you have right now that I could respond to? Can you tell them more about the project with students as co-researchers? Thanks, Sterling. Yeah, so we just created a program called Common Core Transdisciplinary Undergraduate Research. because at Hong Kong U, there are programs for superb students to do extraordinary research. But I'm interested, in addition to that, in students just starting out so they can develop their research skills and develop thinking about what does it mean to inquire, what does it mean to ask a question and become systematic of that and create an expression that's publicly shareable. I'm a big believer in public sharing. So at this moment, we've had 23 applications for this undergraduate research program. They're extraordinary projects, and they all have a faculty mentor. So this accomplishes many goals at once. Very good for the students, but it's also very good for the mentors, and it's good for the Common Core, because it's a general education program, but I want to have a research arm, and this lets us do one of many things to fill that out. GLADE I created because I wanted an international consortium that serves this integrative function. And as we know, in different schools, there are different priorities, sometimes teaching, sometimes research, et cetera. But I wanted a place for conversation. There's many, many projects we do with overseas partners, but it gives you a platform to work from. You got to have some sort of platform. Also, those of you interested in international exchanges should look up COIL, C-O-I-L, if you don't know that. And so one of the things we do is we created Common Core student consultants. And at the University of Birmingham in the UK, they have a program from research to policy. They do research in their first semester, and they create a policy statement around a community issue in Birmingham in their second semester. And our students serve as consultants for that, which is not to be experts. It's only to be listening and attentive respondents, right? Anytime we have things edited, it gets better. About the consortium and the SDGs. Wow, that's a great question too. So we have something called the Hong Kong Sustainable Campus Consortium. So sustainability, campus, and consortium. And that became possible because people thought it was important to join forces around this issue of sustainability and not to silo things out to the operations people on campus. So I'm on the education committee for that. So all 8 universities in Hong Kong. And so there are different tasks for different committees, but we're working to see if every undergraduate student in Hong Kong can be exposed to sustainability education. And we needed machine learning to begin to get a handle on that. Anyway, fantastic colleagues from different parts of the university. And that's another thing, just, you can form, consortium's a nice word, and it allows for this integration. It lets you talk to anybody you want to talk to. That's the thing about GLADE. I just talk to people that interest me around the world. They don't have to do anything if they don't want to, but find ways for local community outreach as well as this broader thing, but we really are in this thing together. Some of you love to teach, and that's all you want to do, and you're great at it. Some of you love to be involved in community engagement and service at the deepest level. I think everybody in this Zoom is service oriented. And some of you love to research, and you wish you could just be a research professor and not be bothered by anybody else. Those are all important to keep in mind. But I agree with Ike that we all have to become a little better at all of them. We want to take advantage of our strengths and get a little better in those other areas, because being a part of a college faculty or administration or university is a community endeavor. If I had my druthers, which I don't, and I never will, but tenure would be given for campus citizenship. That would include high-level research, high-level teaching, and high-level service, but it would give us a rationale for why those things are important. But that will never happen where I am. So the Common Core, it was a very unusual set of circumstances and very fortunate. The whole Hong Kong system changed from a 3-year degree back in 2012 to a 4-year degree to actually to better meet both mainland Chinese and North American degree requirements. And so there was an extra year to play with, and every university in Hong Kong created their own version. CUHK already had a very well-developed version of general education at both the college level and the university level, so that was already in place. But everybody else could create this brand new thing, which is the only time. Actually, when I was at UW Bothell, we also had a similar situation. We could create a new program from scratch, and we created an interdisciplinary program for first and second year students. And then, so since then, it started in 2012, the Common Core, back to that, and we've just developed. And I came in 2014, and I just thought we needed to work across scales. We needed to work on integration. We needed to work on a lot of work on these prefixes of trans and inter. So what is the between and what is the crossing over of transdisciplinarity, transsectoral, translationality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just built up over time. None of us create things immediately and overnight, but that's why I used that image of the compass to start with. You sort of set a direction that's valuable for almost everybody. There's always some people that don't want to play. That's fine. You can't force people to play, but set a direction and then bring more people in and make it a dynamic learning platform. And then people suddenly want to show up. I had a great experience. I was just walking around and a biologist and a physicist and a medical doctor came up to me and said, would it be okay if we taught a course on how engineering duplicates natural process? And I sort of almost fainted, because here's these interdisciplinary people coming to me. This is about 2 years in after 2014, wanting to create this extraordinary course. And so I knew by then that one, integration was beginning to happen, and two, the Common Core was seen as a place people could experiment. That's a term I didn't talk much about, but if you can be seen as an experimental site for the college and the university, that will get you brownie points, and it's also enormously flexible and kind of a great learning space. So we use the Common Core as a research sandbox for surveys, for different types of gamification, as I mentioned, for whatever. I encourage experimentation in the classroom and in the community engagements and in research. So that was the kind of place that we tried to create as a learning space on campus. It was automatically interdisciplinary, but when people create courses, they have to show us that they have an interdisciplinary intent and a structure, or that the courses are not approved. So we approve each course that comes through, and a lot of quality assurance issues and so forth and so on. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to the United Board. Thank you to all of you for taking your time. Thank you to Ike for that fantastic presentation. The work that you're doing in so many different institutions across Asia is incredibly powerful. And I just want to commend all of you on that. I know it's not always easy, and this idea of integrating that Venn diagram that Ike showed us is not easy. But I think the ideas that you've come up with this morning, do one or two of those and you're well on your way, and then see how it happens. Anytime you have questions, you're welcome to email me. I like, as you can tell, I like talking and to be in conversation. So just let me know. And thank you so much, Hope, once again, for the invitation to share with all of you as we kind of learn together.